Hey everybody, welcome back to This Day in History. It is June 15th, 2024, and it's later in the day because, well, I did stuff today. And I even bought a new notebook, so now I'm not squinting so hard when I'm, trying to read and drive. I mean, I shouldn't read and drive, but I'm parked right now, so, it's all good. At any rate, it's a fairly interesting day. We have presidential / head of state birthdays. We have entertainers' birthdays. We have the creation of an important document, and I'll get to that in a moment. We have the confirmation of a commander-in-chief. We have a battle. We have patents. We have border establishments. We have a cemetery consecrated. We have entertainers either passing or retiring. And yeah, some good stuff. So let's get into it, shall we? So it is June 15th. And I have some friends who have birthdays today. My friend Mike Hart, his birthday's today, and I already wished him a happy birthday on Facebook, but, happy birthday, Mike. On this day in 1861, Ernestine Schumann Heink, I think I pronounced it right, H-E-I-N-K, she was born on this day in 1861. Who was she? Well, she was a principal interpreter of operas written by Richard Wagner and Richard Strauss. We talked about Wagner not too long ago. I think he had a birthday. It was either a birthday or the day he died. I can't remember which. I mean, my days just like interlapping and I forget stuff. I'm old. What can I say? 1843, which I believe was the year that we started having settlers come over to Oregon, if I'm not mistaken. At any rate, a Norwegian composer by the name of Edvard Grieg, he was born on this day. 1914, Yuri Andropov. Now, Britannica.com referred to him as the president of the Soviet Union, but they weren't called presidents during the Soviet Union. They were referred to as premiers. Boris Yeltsin was the first president of Russia because they had completely changed from their communist regime to a republic, and we talked about that the other day too. But Andropov. When I clicked on his name to get the official title, they referred to him as the head of state for the Soviet Union, which basically he was a premier, I guess. At any rate, he was born on this day in 1914. On this day in 1950, Lakshmi Mittal, Indian businessman, as in like from India, not what we call the native indigenous tribes here in America, the United States. They're not true Indians. They're natives or indigenous peoples. Why we called, so fun fact, side note, the only reason why we call the indigenous peoples Indians here in the United States is because, well, Christopher Columbus is a moron, and he thought that he was in India when he discovered the Caribbean islands. That's why they're called the West Indies. It's because he thought he'd actually found a way to India, when actually what he did is he just ran into a different continent that he knew that he had no idea that even existed. So that's, and over the centuries, that's just what we called the indigenous people. We, the clueless, ignorant sons of Europe, daughters of Europe, we just called them, either we called them savages or we called them Indians, but they're not really Indian. True India is, that big old country smack between the Middle East and Asia. So there you go. Speaking of Asia, 1953, on this day, Xi Jinping, the president of China, he was born on this day. 10 years later, Helen Hunt, an American actress, and I always thought she was as beautiful as could be. She was one of the more attractive actresses that I enjoyed over the years. Her birthday was today in 1963. 1969, this is the last birthday for the day. In 1969, Ice Cube. And no, not the thing that you put in your beverage. American rapper and actor Ice Cube. His birthday is today, and he was born in 1969. So let's go to the Wayback Machine. We're going to travel back to the year 1215. So what happens in 1215 in England? Well, okay, so it's like this. The Magna Carta is sealed, basically it's signed, and it's put into law, but it was under threat of civil war. See, the thing is that this document was it was a predecessor to things like our Constitution. It basically spelled out rights for the citizens and expressly forbid, gross tyranny of the crown. And basically it required the king to basically hold himself accountable to the law. That the law, basically the man, in this case the king, he's not the law. The law is separate. It's something that is higher than him, that even he, the king, has to submit to that authority. And what it was is that this had been a while coming. King John, this is the same King John who was formerly Prince John. And if you remember the other day when we talked about Robin Hood, for instance, King Richard the Lionheart went off to Europe, the Holy Lands, to participate in the Crusades. And he was actually killed in the Crusades. So his brother ends up taking over. Never mind the Disney animated Robin Hood or any of the Robin Hood movies that you've seen in the past where, King Richard, makes this triumphant return and he puts his brother Prince John in his place. That actually historically did not happen. King Richard was killed and the crown was brought back to England, where John was crowned king, and John was just a wee bit of a tyrant, but the nobles had insisted on this document known as the Magna Carta, and basically said, you can either sign this into law and hold yourself to it, or all of us nobles, we're going to rally against you, and we're going to take you out. And we'll crown ourselves another king that will hold themselves to this document, because that's something that Richard would have approved of. Richard would have, I am surmising, historically speaking, I think it's a pretty good assessment that Richard would have supported Magna Carta, whereas his brother not so much, because he wanted to be a tyrannical dick. But Richard's dead and John is king, so John feels empowered that, hey, I'm king, I can do whatever I want. Well, the nobles are like, well, it's like this. You can either choose to be a good king, or you can be a bad king. And if you're going to be a bad king, then we're all going to rise up against you. And to keep the peace, he capitulated and he signed the Magna Carta, or he sealed the Magna Carta, basically, accepting it as law and putting it in motion. And the rest is history from there. The Magna Carta was heavily influenced our U.S. Constitution. The very basic principle of the Magna Carta is, freedom from tyranny and, and liberty, those concepts, which ring very, very strong in the U.S. Constitution. So 1215 Magna Carta. 1389, the Battle of Kosovo. It was the Serbian army versus the Ottoman Empire. It was Prince Lazar of the Serbians versus Murad I of the Ottomans. Well, that battle concludes on this day in 1389 with an Ottoman victory. And that makes sense because Kosovo is Serbia. Serbia is, my generation would have known it as Yugoslavia. Which that region was very heavily, very ethnic. You were either, a lot of them were either like Orthodox Jews, or they were of Muslim descent. So, I mean, there's a bit of friction in that country too. And I think that, when I was in high school, when I was graduating high school, the whole Bosnian conflict, which had I been able to stay in the army, I was to be sent over there for the peacekeeping mission in Bosnia. That's essentially what it was all about. It was all these rival ethnic groups, struggling with each other. And then you had some douchebag by the name of Milosevic who thought that he was empowered to engage in a practice known as ethnic cleansing. He didn't like what race you were from or what heritage you were from, so he wanted to wipe you out. Basically he was another Hitler. We eventually did take him out. We captured him and took him to The Hague and prosecuted him for war crimes. When I say we, I mean the global community, not just us, the United States, but the UN took care of that. But 1775, George Washington, yes, our very first president. Well, our president under our current constituted regime. I shouldn't say regime, system. Yeah, system. When we had an interim government, there was another president. So if we're going to brass tacks, U.S. president-wise, George Washington technically was number 2, but he is the first United States president under our Constitution, because the president before him, which I forget his name, he, it was when the Articles of Confederation was put forth. He was the president of that interim government, and they were called I want to say they were like the Confederated something or other. I'm not sure. I can't remember what they were called, but they were an interim government because they knew that they were actually going to form a more solid government. But they had to have a leader for the short time, and that was that. Anyway, I'm digressing. George Washington. It's on this day in 1775 that he is named the commander-in-chief of the colonies, meaning colonial forces, by the Continental Congress. 1844, Charles Goodyear. You might know the name Goodyear. Why would you know the name Goodyear? Because, automobiles have Goodyear tires. That's right, Goodyear So here's something about Charles Goodyear, right? In 1844, he receives his patent for the process of rubber vulcanization. And rubber vulcanization is what led to the creation of tires for the express purpose of putting wheels on vehicles. Now, mind you, we didn't have actual vroom vroom vehicles back then, but bicycles did make, I mean, bicycles were on the scene. I'm wanting to say late 1850s. I'm not sure, but I mean, the rubber vulcanization process was used to make the bicycle tires, and then eventually, when we had, modern vehicles, they were, they became, the process was used to make tires as we know it. 1846. Okay, this is something that kind of hits me, or not hits me, but it affects me because, I'm from Oregon, right? So 1846, the United States and Britain signed the Oregon Treaty. And the Oregon Treaty established the border between the United States once and for all. It establishes the border between the United States and Canada. Canada at the time being Great Britain. It wasn't its own independent nation. It was a colonial territory of Great Britain. And we almost got into another war, a third war with Britain over. It was that back then I think they said something to the effect of 54-40 or fight. I think that's what the slogan was. Like, they were very adamant about going to war if we didn't get it settled. And it ended up being that, I believe, if I remember right, it ended up being a German arbiter that actually had settled the dispute as to what was the actual border between Canada and the United States. And so what they did is they settled on the 49th parallel as having been that was the border straight across. So what that did, the Oregon Territory, mind you, consisted of way northern California, like the Siskiyous area, all of the state of Oregon, Idaho, and Washington State, and then there was quite a bit of British Columbia that was involved in that. When you look at the San Juan Islands in the Juan de Fuca Strait there, there's the San Juan Islands, there was Victoria Island, all those islands. So they were in dispute as to, we the Americans wanted to say Victoria is ours, but the British were like, no, Victoria and the San Juans are ours. So what this German arbiter did is that he's like, okay, Victoria goes to the British, the San Juans go to the Americans. We set the 49th parallel straight across the board, and that is anything south of the 49th parallel, that's the United States. North of that parallel, it's England's Canada. We avoided war, and we ended up being, that's how our border was negotiated and disputed amicably and peacefully. And that was in 1846. 1864, Arlington National Cemetery is established. Now, how it's established is that the United States government basically seized 200 acres of Robert E. Lee's estate in Virginia. And they took this big parcel, this 200-acre parcel, and excuse me, and that became Arlington National Cemetery. It's where JFK is buried. It's where basically our nation's heroes are buried. 80 years later, 1944, the Marines are doing a great job of island hopping on their way to Japan to try to end the war. It is on this day that the United States Marines attacked the island of Saipan. And Saipan is in the, if you know your geography in the Pacific, it's in the Mariana Islands. So that happened in 1944. 1996, Ella Fitzgerald. Ella Fitzgerald, I never really listened to her, but I mean, I knew who she was based on the fact that she was, I mean, she was an American icon for one, very heavy in the music world. I mean, she was African-American singer. She had an amazing voice. She was known for her music being in the style of jazz, as well as what they call scat. At any rate, it was on this day in 1996 that she would pass away at the age of 79. It was a sad day for music there, because, I mean, she was very talented. In last for today, in 2007, Bob Barker, after over 30 years of being the host of The Price is Right, retires. He retired from doing the show as host. He lived, I think he's passed now, but he just enjoyed retirement, I suppose. If you've ever watched Happy Gilmore, there's a great scene in that movie where he and Adam Sandler, who plays the title character Happy Gilmore, they get into this big fight, and Sandler's character says something like, "The price is wrong, Bob," and that was a reference to The Price is Right game show that Bob Barker hosted. Now it's comedian Drew Carey hosts the show, and he actually does a pretty decent job with it. I mean, I don't watch it very often, but it's there nonetheless. So I kind of rabbit trailed a bit. It's going on almost 23 minutes here, so I'm going to end this and say, be well, take care of yourselves. Enjoy your day. Do enjoy, if you're a father, enjoy Father's Day tomorrow, Sunday, June 16th. So with that, I'm just going to say, be blessed, take care, and we will do this day in history again tomorrow for June 16th. So have a good one. Bye.